Welcome. Welcome. Thank you for coming today. I think Joel would approve of the way people are settling down, so thank you very much. Could we go ahead and have the first image up, please? Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Alex Harris, and this is one of the photographs I made recently at Joel's house. I am so honored to be the first person to speak here this afternoon, but I'm going to let my 5-minute photographic presentation speak for me. I just want to let people know that it was at the request of Doug Zinn and Adam Abram that 10 days ago I photographed Joel's home and office so that we would all have a record of those spaces. Over the years, one of the things I've learned as a photographer is that you can make a portrait of a person without that person being in the picture. I've learned that we all leave traces behind, traces that can be seen and felt, traces that speak especially to those of us who knew that person best, like all of us in this room individually and together knew Joel Fleishman. So this is my portrait of Joel. Thank you.
Hello and welcome. My name is Manoj Mohanan. I serve as the current interim dean of the Sanford School of Public Policy. Welcome to the celebration of life of Joel Fleishman, a transformational leader in the Duke University community and beyond. Whether you're here in person or those of you who are joining us online, we welcome you. As we gather today, we honor the most remarkable man whose impact spanned more than half a century, touching countless lives through his scholarship, his mentorship, his unwavering commitment to public service. Joel was not just the founding director of Duke's Sanford School of Public Policy when it was a public policy program. He was a visionary leader who transformed the landscape of philanthropy and public policy education nationally and globally. As you will hear from our speakers today, he touched all of our lives. His energy and enthusiasm was infectious, as we know, inspiring generations of faculty and students alike. At 90 years old, or 90 years young, given how sprightly he was, Joel leaves behind an extraordinary legacy, a legacy of compassion, intellect, and profound belief in the power of community and connection. He was a passionate educator and a friend to many, embodying the best that Duke has to offer. As we reflect on his life and his contributions today, let us celebrate the values he championed: generosity, curiosity, and the pursuit of knowledge. Together, as we remember Joel, especially in his commitment to continuing the work that he so passionately pursued, it is now my honor and pleasure to introduce President Vincent Price of Duke University to share more about Joel and pay tributes to his legacy. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining this celebration of the life and the legacy of Joel Fleishman, and thank you for that wonderful photographic last visit to his home. What stood out from the moment I met Joel, and my time with him was short compared to the time so many in this room spent with him, was that he was seemingly everywhere. He is everywhere on this campus in so many different ways. But from the first time Annette and I came here to the Washington Duke Inn, and almost every time I've come here since for lunch, Joel was here. Spending time with colleagues and friends, commanding so much appropriate attention, and it's hard to imagine this place without Joel here. What was also clear from my earliest days at Duke was Joel's impact on this university and its people, and it was simply extraordinary. He was an administrator, a scholar, a teacher, a builder of programs, a fundraiser, and above all, a friend, a colleague, and a connector of people. I've already heard that word connector once, at least once, and I think we'll be hearing it a lot today. As I reflect on all that Joel accomplished in more than half a century at Duke, I'm struck by the many ways that his vision, his commitment to our academic mission, his gift, his incredible gift for fostering relationships with others, shaped a legacy that will be carried forward by generations of his students, his colleagues, his friends. That will indeed be his lasting mark on the world. Joel arrived at Duke, as many of you know, at the request of then President Terry Sanford, and he did so with a clear understanding of the role of education in developing public policy leaders. He brought with him a vision for building a new type of interdisciplinary program that would draw on many fields, including economics, ethics, political science, and history, and that would encourage our students to actively engage with policy development as a part of their educational experience. He often expressed that the best way to cultivate great public policy leaders was to bring together smart people from varied backgrounds, to listen and to learn from one another, to spread the gift that he himself exemplified so very well. He not only laid out the vision for what public policy studies could be at Duke University, he built it. He led it. He inspired others to provide the support required to launch and to sustain the institute that would later become our Sanford School of Public Policy. Joel's engagement with philanthropy was all-encompassing, and his impact there also enduring. Through his scholarship, his wise counsel, and generous mentorship, he had widespread influence on the practice of philanthropy, and we saw it in the stacks of books in his home. Through his personal generosity, he supported Jewish life and community here on Duke's campus, and many other causes and organizations that were close to his heart, including Share Our Strength and its mission to end childhood hunger in America. And through his visionary approaches to the role of philanthropy in supporting this university's mission, he completely transformed our institutional fundraising practices and put Duke on a new and a powerful trajectory for success that has continued over the past 4 decades. In all aspects of his life, Joel understood and harnessed better than anyone, I think, the power of relationships, the power of bringing people together around common points of interest, or because they in combination could advance a cause or solve a problem that none of them in isolation could address. And Joel just didn't facilitate introductions. He did that. He facilitated a lot of introductions. But he did so much more. He felt so very deeply about the purpose of his work and his commitments. And over the course of my presidency, I've benefited greatly from his insights and perspectives. And in fact, it wasn't all that long ago that he and Abdullah and Tepley came and sat with me and talked with me in my office about ways that we at Duke could do more to help bridge the differences that threaten to divide us and sometimes overwhelm us. Joel's legacy will live long at the Sanford School of Public Policy, at the Fleishman House, and through the work and the lives of thousands of colleagues, of students, alumni, and friends who benefited from his wisdom, his generosity, and his spirit that he brought to everything that he did. Indeed, as we remember Joel today, let's do so in celebration of a life so extraordinarily well-lived and in a legacy that will inspire all of us long into the future. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Senator Mary Wells Bodie, and it is my honor and privilege to be here today on behalf of Governor Roy Cooper to present our dear friend, Joel Lawrence Fleishman, posthumously with the Order of the Longleaf Pine. As some of you may know, the Order of the Longleaf Pine is the most prestigious award bestowed upon civilians by the state of North Carolina. This award is reserved for people of this state who have exemplified the highest levels of exemplary service to our state. We can all agree that Joel qualifies for this award in spades. The Order of the Longleaf Pine itself is a small token of our state's appreciation for Joel. But I know, more importantly, that his legacy will continue to impact our state in innumerable ways, and that his life will continue to be a blessing to so many generations to come. And hopefully this will hang in a place somewhere on Duke's campus where other students can see Joel's legacy and be inspired to also one day receive the Order of the Longleaf Pine. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Billy Shore. Here's a friend of Joel's. I want to start by thanking Cassie Lewis for being Joel's indispensable assistant and for all the work that went into this, including inviting me here today. Thank you so much. I've been blessed with many privileges in my life, but none greater than the love and the friendship of Joel Fleishman and this opportunity to celebrate him with you. It's fitting that there's not just one speaker here today, but a number of speakers, because it would be impossible for any one of us to convey the many facets of Joel. I thought I might use my couple minutes not to speak of Joel the professor or Joel the philanthropist, which some of you know a little bit more about than I do, but as Joel the friend. Almost everybody has a story about the vast and eclectic network of human talent that orbited around Joel's shining, sparkling sun, in which he was always eager to leverage for good. One of my own memorable experiences in this regard was when Joel invited me to see the musical Hamilton with him at the height of its Broadway run about 8 years ago. We were to first have dinner with a Broadway legend named Manny Eisenberg, who of course was a good friend of Joel's, and who was getting us the tickets. When I got to the restaurant just around the corner from the theater, Manny said, "Did you pick up the tickets?" And I thought Manny was going to bring them, so I panicked for a moment. And I said, "No, I thought you had them." And Manny said, "Just walk over to the box office, ask for Eddie or Freddie, and say Manny and Joel want you to have the good seats." I didn't see how this could possibly work. There were literally 5,000 people standing in line hoping for a ticket that might be turned back. I looked over at Joel. With that twinkle in his eye, he mouthed the words, "Eddie and Freddie." And so I walked over to the theater. Well, sure enough, the tickets were there. They were the seats that Michelle and Barack Obama had sat in the night before. They were very good seats, and once again, the invisible arm and powerful influence of Joel Fleishman had made itself felt. To say that Joel was a mentor puts me in a pool almost as large as the group that was waiting for the Hamilton tickets. We were first introduced by my friend and City Year founder, Alan Casey, and within 20 minutes of our conversation in Joel's New York office, he said, "You must come to Duke and teach one of my classes." And so I did for every year for the next 25 years, followed always by the dinner party at his home with students and faculty and the most interesting people in North Carolina, including education and political and philanthropic leaders who might be passing through. In many cases, people who I had tried to meet for years unsuccessfully, and there they were in Joel's living room. During the few semesters I was not able to teach, I'd come to Duke anyway. And I'd have dinner with Joel, or we'd take walks or just hang out. And one summer, I flew down to his beach house where he was staying at Kill Devil Hill in the Outer Banks. And we walked several miles that day, and we drank great wines, and we called friends of his late into the night. And I remember saying, "Joel, you've been coming here for many summers, for many years. You must really love it." And he smiled, and he said, "Actually, not so much. I don't like sun or sand. I do it for my housekeeper, Grace. She grew up doing this, and it's important to her." And that was also part of Joel's eclectic network and his code of friendship and loyalty. He was a true American original, one of the most youthful minds I've ever known, and he used it to write books and to teach and to critique and to travel and to relentlessly connect people, as the president said, a connector that he thought should know one another. And he especially fought hard for young people, for the ideas that they had and the organizations and campaigns that they wanted to launch. I know a lot of people who get excited about ideas, especially and usually their own. Joel was the opposite. He was always genuinely excited about other people's ideas, encouraging, editing, refining, connecting, financing. And so was born Bridgespan, led by the brilliant Jeff Braddock, who is here today, and the Center on Effective Philanthropy, led by Phil Buchanan, and Share Our Strength subsidiary, Community Wealth Partners, and so many others. Most of all, Joel was excited about friendship and about doing all the things that friends do together: share books, travel, walk, talk, learn from each other. Have I mentioned wine? I've been to Duke many times over the past 3 decades, but as I suspect is the case for many of us, given Joel's longevity, this is the first time I've been here without Joel to greet me. There was a reliable rhythm of ritual that came with having Joel in one's life, and that may be what I will miss the most. His singing happy birthday to my voicemail every February, the annual holiday prayer and card on which he labored sometimes for months, which arrived every December in his class that I taught. And on top of everything else, his humility and humor, which simply made him such a lovely person to be around. His impact on me was to always make me want to do better, not just for his approval, but because he took such joy in others' success. And though Joel is no longer with us, his legacy lives on in books, in buildings, in students, in all of us in this room, and of course in New York on Broadway, in Eddie and Freddie. So if you're ever in a pinch, remember, ask for Eddie or Freddie and tell them Joel sent you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Philip Cook. I'm a professor emeritus of public policy, and I had the pleasure and inspiration of Joel's friendship for 50 years. He gave me a chance at age 26 to join his bold, even quixotic mission to create a public policy program at Duke, and in the process provide a model of what Duke was not at the time, but has become a university where work across disciplinary boundaries is the norm and where engagement with the outside world is encouraged. When Joel hired me in 1973, the Institute of Policy Sciences and Public Affairs was a year old, a small startup enterprise with 3 junior faculty members, 2 of whom had not yet finished their PhDs. It had been created by Terry Sanford in what I soon discovered was a rather hostile environment. Zero-sum thinking was all too common at the time, sometimes to the point of absurdity. The chairman, or I guess the English department, once complained to Joel that Bruce Payne was assigning authors in his policy ethics course that, quote, belonged to the English department, such as William Faulkner and so forth. Some colleagues in the social sciences had an abiding prejudice against multidisciplinary programs and policy engagement, both of which were viewed as intellectually flaky at best. They joked about policy-wallacy and our fluff major and so on. Yet somehow, Joel was able to persuade a lot of very talented young faculty to join his cause. David Price, who's with us in my year, and others who became prominent leaders or stellar scholars or both. He was a great recruiter, in part because of his vision, which was so appealing for those of us who came of age during the 1960s. And of course, as we've heard from Billy and saw from Alex, there were the parties at his house, some of which were recruiting parties where the candidate du jour would be snowed by being introduced to scores of extraordinary people all the way along. In part, he was also effective because he instilled confidence that anything was possible under his upbeat leadership. I have a fond memory of sitting in his office in Old Chem one time while he completed a phone call that resulted in another small victory in the ongoing struggle to become established. He turned to me with a laugh after he hung up and he said, "Isn't this fun?" That never would have occurred to me, but he meant it. As a far-sighted change agent, he had to fight so many battles over the years. A lot of this was not easy, folks, as you know. yet I never saw him weighed down. He remained good-humored, wise, deeply committed until the end. Extraordinary.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bruce Jennelson, member of the faculty of the Sanford School, and came here in the year 2000 as director of the then Sanford Institute. And when I made my initial visits to the campus, I'd met lots of people, lots of faculty, lots of students, President Cohane, Dean Bill Chafe, but I hadn't met Joel. I think he was out of town. When I accepted the position and came, I knew that the most important meeting I was going to have when I got here was with this Joel Fleishman that I had heard so much about. And I also knew that if I blew the meeting, I was like toast, right? You know. So I went out to that lovely house in Chapel Hill, had some great wine, and we talked. And as I was going to meet Joel, after all the things I'd heard about him and everything, you know, you always wonder if somebody who founded something is going to have founder syndrome, right? We did it this way, and, you know. But Joel had founder's love. Joel had founder's love for the people, for the mission, and for the entity that he had played such a major role in creating. And that was so clear, not just from what he said, but as everybody else has said, from the way he said it. And it wasn't just in that meeting, it continued on. And as Phil was just talking about, creating this institute, you know, it's often said that academia is politically liberal and organizationally conservative. And to innovate, interdisciplinary, connect more to the outside world. This was really done by President Sanford and Joel at a time when the Kennedy School was being created at Harvard and others. You know, this was like, I won't say revolutionary, that's an overstatement, but oh my God, we're doing things differently. You know, what's going on here? And then Joel said, there's another really important meeting you need to have, and I'll take you to it. And that was with Margaret Rose Sanford, the widow of Terry Sanford. Terry had died a few years earlier. I'd actually met him a couple times, once when he was a senator and another time. And I was really nervous for that meeting too. I figured going into it, well, I had one thing going to. My wife Barbara was from the Deep South, and even though I was a Yankee, well, I won't get into the Yankees here, but you know, I was a Yankee, that I might have learned a few things about being proper around a dignified Southern woman. And between a little bit of training and Joel's stamp, I had a wonderful conversation with Mrs. Sanford, and she was very pleased for where we were going to go and could only say, I wish my husband was here and everything. And that was how we started. We worked together for a number of years. With Joel, we raised the money from David Rubenstein to build Rubenstein Hall, which was really David's first major gift to do. But it was really through the relationship Joel had with him that we were able to do that. Not only did we work together, but he was very gracious, and he took Barbara and I and our family into his community. And one of the examples of that, and some of you have experienced this as well, is being invited to one of Joel's Passover Seders, right? Now, when I was growing up, my grandfather used to do these really, really long Seders, right? And they'd go on forever. And you'd get this, when I was old enough, this sweet Manischewitz wine, and you got to drink 4 glasses, and you know, it's just sweet Manischewitz wine. And then there was the groups that would say their version of the Seder was, you know, we were slaves in Egypt, they tried to kill us, we escaped, let's eat, right? So here was Joel's Seder, long but interesting. And the wine was really good. It was kosher, but it was really good wine. And, you know, people would talk, you'd have interesting people there all the time, and you'd get into really interesting, not just the usual, you know, text of the Haggadah. And then the one thing that I think amazed me was one of the ceremonial foods is a bitter herb called mourn for the pain that people. And we would get these little sauces made in Brooklyn, you know, for our Seders. Joel would bring out the root. And it was like his one, come on, let's see how vigorous we are. And you would have to take a slice of the root, and maybe it helped your sinuses if it was the season. But boy, that was really tough stuff. And then Joel would demonstrate by, you know, showing how it was done without any tears or anything. And so the whole experience of knowing Joel, working with him, having been through everything in the last month, visits in the hospital, and the beauty of his, true beauty of the eulogies at his funeral. I feel privileged and honored to have been able to have him, at least for a quarter century or so, as a friend and a colleague and a mentor who lives on, I think, in me as well as he does in all of us. Thank you.
It is such an honor for me to be part of this celebration of Joel's life. I have to say, and as Billy Shore did, thank you, Cassie. Let's give her another hand for pulling all this together where you're sitting. Thank you. I was just so honored to have been asked to speak at his funeral and then again today, and at neither place do I feel I can do Joel justice. But like all of you, I'm going to try. Full disclosure, I always thought that I was one of Joel Fleishman's very best friends. But I've come to understand, since he left us, that there were a lot of other people who felt that way. I want you to raise your hand in this room if you think Joel thought of Joel as a okay, look at all it. Each one of us here, each one of you, is a powerful reminder of the many lives that he touched. President Price spoke about Joel's role as a mentor, the countless individuals he inspired. I am living proof of that. From the first time I met him in 1975, I was a young reporter for NBC News. He worked for Duke's president, Terry Sanford. I could tell he was a man with a mission. Over the years, he did become one of my dearest friends, somebody I turned to for advice on virtually every big professional decision I made. In 2006, when I was deciding whether to stay or leave CNN without another full-time job on the horizon, Joel said, of course. And he talked me into teaching a course at the Sanford School. He knew that I had never been able to study public policy. I graduated from Duke before there was public policy. It was called political science back then. He talked me into this, much harder than I expected it to be. I now have even more respect for anybody who teaches, and which I was completely unprepared for, but which I wouldn't have traded for anything. And that's thanks to Joel. After I returned to PBS and the NewsHour a couple of years later, only to discover that those were lean fundraising years for public broadcasting. We could only give away so many tote bags and coffee mugs. Mr. Philanthropy gave me the best advice about who to talk to, who to reach out to. He put me in touch with them and made sure that we connected. We all know how important faith was to Joel, and I guess that explains how he knew more people than God. Thank you, Billy, for making that clear. It dawned on me one day early in our friendship that I couldn't go more than 3 or 4 days without running into somebody who knew Joel. Airports, TV studios, college campuses, big cities, small towns, congressional offices. Of course, how do you know Joel Fleishman? He loved life, he loved helping his friends, and he had a way of radiating joy, even when you were talking about the most serious subject with him. I've thought a lot about what shaped Joel, aside from his family and what mattered to him. It clearly had a great deal to do with those early years that he spent around Terry Sanford as his legal advisor in the early 1960s, as Terry Sanford was cementing his reputation as one of America's greatest governors of the 20th century, who, as a Southerner, we know, took courageous stands on civil rights, on strengthening education, and who, as the Sanford School notes on its website, helped to transform the state of North Carolina into a national leader in fighting poverty. All of that has helped set this state apart ever since, so it's entirely fitting that Joel today received the Order of the Longleaf Pine honor. What Joel and others who worked for Terry Sanford did so clearly, what they learned was the enduring importance of public policy in a democratic society, of principled leadership, a belief that government matters, because it's about real people and their lives, about their welfare, and it's about being made one decision at a time. In an era when we hear politicians and government workers routinely put down and denigrated, when we hear public employees belittled, it is a perfect moment to remember the kind of public servant that Terry Sanford was, and by extension, the amazing young man who worked for him and carried on those values throughout his life. Joel, along with Tom Lambeth, and I don't know if Tom is here today, was among the last of what you might call Terry's boys, who under Sanford's leadership literally changed this state at a time of great challenge. Terry Sanford, with Joel's help, went on to similarly begin the transformation of this university from what in my day was considered the finest private university in the South into one of the great global universities, a world-class research institution. Despite this, Joel continued to live behind enemy lines in the hometown of his alma mater, or as he liked to call it, on his home phone voicemail message, which he told me last April when I asked him about it. I said, when did you record that? He said he recorded it about 50 years earlier. And you all have heard it, but I'm going to read a part of it. You have reached Joel Fleishman's sylvan retreat in the southern part of heaven, otherwise known as Chapel Hill. And I imagine that right now he truly is in the southern part of heaven. And as he added on that voicemail, that he's likely praying, jogging, drinking wine, reading Shakespeare, listening to Mozart, or something of a similar pleasure. He made the world a better place, and each of us is better for having known him. Like all of you, I was incredibly lucky to have him in my life, and like all of you, I hope to pay tribute to him by continuing to live the values that he cherished. Thank you.
I'm Bruce Cunningham, professor at Duke. We're here this afternoon to celebrate Joel's life and his extraordinary capacity to bring people together within his expansive network to achieve the goal of putting knowledge in the service of society, a mantra of the Sanford School, which is only one of his legacies. The Joel Connection, or circle of acquaintances which helped to realize this goal, has been frequently mentioned by Frank Bruni in the last week or two in the New York Times, and by Judy here just right now. But it's less well documented, and its pervasiveness, which is my focus here this afternoon, is illustrated by some absolutely true stories, which a few of you have heard me discuss, but which deserve being repeated here. My first awareness of the Joel Connection, a precursor to LinkedIn, which only trademarked what Joel invented, but which lacks the Farganen of the original, goes way back to 1973. Farganen, by the way, is Yiddish for joy or delight, or selfless pride in the accomplishments of others. It was a key to Joel's capacity to draw others into his network. I was flying from Washington, D.C. to RDU, which was then a postage stamp of an airport, when a stranger sitting next to me asked me what I did. When I told him I worked at Duke, he asked me if I knew Joel Fleishman. Yeah, I said, I sure do. And we quickly became engaged in a discussion of Joel and the newly created institute he had founded. This familiar litany, as Judy mentioned, has been repeated countless times, not just in my experience, but in that of almost anyone who travels and virtually everyone who flies. In my early days at Duke, I was only beginning to grasp the extent of his network and the simple fact that he not only knew everybody, but was good friends with almost everybody, with at most 2 degrees of separation, which is 5 less than Kevin Bacon's 7. 21 years later, after my first stint as director of the Institute, I recounted this connection to my son, who had joined me when I was a fellow at the Nobel Institute in Oslo at the time of the Nobel Prize ceremony in 1994, when Perez, Rabin, and Arafat got their Nobel Prizes. Because my son doubted my claims of Joel's vast network of friends, which isn't the first time that he doubted something I had said, we made a $20 bet of whether or not the person seated next to me at the ceremony, whom neither of us had met, would know Joel. This gentleman took no offense at my sudden question out of the blue, which apparently he wasn't being asked for the first time. Without batting an eye, Avishai Braverman, president of Ben Gurion University in Israel, informed me that he not only knew Joel, but was having dinner with him in the following month to follow up some joint initiatives. I can give any skeptics Jonathan's phone number if you don't believe me. Subsequently, when as vice provost, I traveled across the globe on behalf of Duke, an absent, then non-existent Instagram app, when I wanted to kill time or felt the desire to initiate a conversation, I popped a question. Do you know a guy named Joel Fleishman? To elicit a story of a meaningful interaction with Joel, and it never failed, whether on a cruise ship in the Baltic, in a dungeon in France, on the Great Wall of China, at the Harlan Winery in Napa Valley, or once on a gondola in Venice's Grand Canal. At one point, I became so convinced that everybody knew Joel, I perversely began to hold back, waiting for the moment when I thought I'd finally found a person or an outpost where I would get a negative response, and took obtaining that outcome as a personal challenge. The occasion that finally led me to give up was when I was returning from a Fulbright in Turkey. I had arrived early in the morning at Ataturk Airport in Istanbul. There was only one person ahead of me in the queue to check baggage, waiting for the computers to become operational. He was a middle-aged, grizzled man in cowboy boots, faded jeans, a buckskin jacket, and a cowboy hat, sort of a wizened Beto O'Rourke, who was sitting on his suitcase and smoking a Camel, which you were allowed to do in Turkish airports in those days. We exchanged pleasantries, after which he told me he was a plane jockey, a pilot, who had just delivered a 747 to Kazakhstan and was returning home to Texas via Istanbul. At last, I thought, I've found what I'm looking for. So, excuse me, I said with some trepidation, I don't mean to be intrusive, but do you by chance know a guy named Joel Fleishman? Yeah. I sure do. How on earth, I then asked, do you know Joel? Well, it turned out he'd testified before a committee of the National Research Council. Chaired by Joel back in 1991, it was conducting a comprehensive study of domestic air transportation. I knew nobody would believe this story, so before we checked our bag, I asked him for his calling card, and when I shared the story just a few years ago at the celebration of a deanship endowed in Joel's name, I presented the card to Joel, who acknowledged its veracity, and I have a picture to prove it. So this raises the question, how many people here consider themselves friends of Joel? This is the question that Judy asked. See that? Careful analysis by people like Phil Cook and the departed Jim Vopel, who I consider the intellectual grandfathers of public policy at Sanford, might debate the statistical validity of this assertion, but to me, what we have witnessed here is clearly a representative sample. It speaks to everyone's continuing connections with Joel, to his passion and collaborative leadership capacities to take selfless pride in the accomplishments of others, and to bring them and all of us together through his network, not just to savor fine wine, which was important, but also to continue doing meaningful work by harnessing their knowledge to address some of society's thorniest and complex problems. Thank you.
For the past 40 years, I've been traveling the world looking for investors or investments, and I've been to more than 85 countries. Every time I go to a country, people ask, where did I go to school? And I say Duke, and their immediate reaction is, do you know Joel Fleishman? This is everywhere. It's Taiwan, it's Mongolia, it's the Soviet Union or Russia, it's Turkey, it's Europe, everywhere. Everywhere I go, people say, do you know Joel Fleishman? And I've always said, yes, he's a friend of mine. It's hard for me to believe today that I no longer can say he's with us. I understand intellectually he's gone, but he's always going to be part of my life because he's known by everybody all over the world. And he's known by so many people, and I can tell you the theory behind it is because he's actually was a triplet. There were 3 Joel Fleischmans. No one else could possibly by himself have done everything and known as many people as Joel did. From writing birthday greetings to people, singing birthday songs, Christmas cards, whatever it might be, Joel was always there with a wish for somebody to make their life better. He was the soul of Duke University, and he was a person that I will greatly miss. I always thought that Joel was a person that could never do anything wrong and never worried about himself. He always worried about other people. That's the kind of people I wish we had more of in this world, and I'm really going to regret not being able to talk to Joel every day. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is David Lauren, and I've been friends with Joel for as long as I can remember. Really, I met Joel when I was about 17 years old, and I came to visit Duke, and it was a life-changing moment for me. And when I was thinking about colleges and what my future would be, I felt like I had met a friend. I had met somebody who was really unusual, but I wasn't sure where that relationship would go. When I actually became a student at Duke, I remember walking through the hallways and along the courtyards, and I would see Joel at random moments throughout the year, and he would wave across the quad and go, David, David! And I'd see his bushy eyebrows and his, he used to always wear these ties with flowers on them, and he would come bustling across the grass and give me a big hug. And he really became a friend and a mentor and someone that I turned to for life advice. And he was a teacher. For everybody that met him, he was a teacher. But for me, I remember starting a magazine at school, and I took great pride in gathering fellow students, and we put together something that we thought told a story of what it was like to be in our 20s. And I remember bringing it to him when it was done. And I said, Joel, I want to show you something that I'm so proud of. And he spent many, many days going through it. And he sent it back to me. It was a beautiful letter saying, congratulations to you and your team. You've done a tremendous job. I'm very proud of you. But please come to my office tomorrow. And when I came to his office, he had written on every page of the publication comments and really had proofread the magazine for grammar, split infinitives, and all kinds of grammatical inconsistencies that he saw. He wanted to bring to our attention what we really needed to know about being journalists. He wasn't as interested in the content as he was in making sure that we perfected the English language. And so I learned a lot about that. And in that moment, I remember going through the publication with him, discussing the articles and our philosophy. We talked about public policy. We talked about the issues in the world. And finally, when I closed the magazine, I said, this has been incredible, this amazing afternoon. Did you like the cover? And he said, well, who is that on the cover of the magazine? I said, Joel, you know everything about everything. And how do you not know who that is? This is someone who is an inspiration for people in their 20s, and he's a role model to tell us about what his life was like in his 20s. And he says, I have no idea who that is. I said, we got an interview with somebody that you should know better than us. And he's like, well, who is it? I said, it's Paul McCartney. And he said, who? So it was an amazing moment to discover the one thing that Joel did not know. But through my life with Joel, he became someone that I learned to trust, and we had very deep conversations about life and love. And ultimately, he was there at my wedding, where he stood before all of our guests and was the cantor and ushered me into yet a new phase of my life as a guide, as a spiritual leader, as someone that took me on a journey of growing up and learning about myself. I felt, and I think I've never really had somebody that really understood me in the way that he did, and having someone who was older and as sophisticated and as learned as him, I learned how to be a better me. And I'm so lucky for the love and the confidence he put in me, for the warmth he showed me all the time, for the wine he let me taste, and for the life that we had together. So I miss him every day. This has been difficult for all of us. I cherish this relationship, and it will hopefully be a relationship that I can pay forward to someday, to a student, to someone that I think will come along, and I could remember Joel Fleishman taught me how to be a better person, and I want to be a better mentor for someone else. So thank you to all of you for having me today, and thank you for honoring Joel this way and for always supporting Joel. Duke was a place that he loved so deeply, and he made me feel that love and everybody around him. His investment in the university, his investment in people, his investment in the community is something that we're all lucky to have. So thank you.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Rothermere. I first met Joel when I was at Duke. I'm class of 1991. Joel, you could say, adopted me and became a great friend and mentor to me over the last 30 years. I shared many a good bottle of wine with him, and he taught me a lot about viniculture as well as everything else in life. Joel was always passionate about what he was doing, and he was always passionate about people that he cared about. Joel collected relationships like he collected wine, and he enjoyed those relationships and nurtured them. He meant a lot to me, and I shall miss him a great deal. I think the best way we can remember Joel is by supporting the Sanford and his philanthropic causes. Joel believed his whole life that service to others was the most important thing. And I think that's the best way we can remember him, is by serving others.
Hi, I'm Greg Baer. I'm a graduate of Duke University, and I'm someone who in this lifetime was lucky to call Joel Fleishman my friend. I offer these brief words to all of you gathered today at Dear Old Duke with heartfelt gratitude to all of you, especially those of you with whom my memories of Joel are forever intertwined, because you too are part of his story and this time together. During the past few years, Joel ended nearly all of his emails to me with these two beautiful words: love, Joel. It's quite a thing to read these words from a beloved teacher and mentor who over the years became a dear friend to me and to my family. In so many ways, I've pursued my commitments to public service as Joel did in the fields of philanthropy, civil society, and public policy. And along my path, Joel opened doors, made introductions, pushed my thinking, and generally encouraged me. I know he did that for you too. And happily, my memories over the decades blurredly hold together the times that we spoke together at events, enjoyed good food and even better wine, and engaged in meaningful conversations. His holiday cards are gifts that I've kept and treasured, and his many charitable gifts are something for us all to celebrate. For me, it was an honor of a lifetime that Joel invited me back to Duke to speak about my book as part of the Foundation Impact Research Seminar. And as Joel was so generous to do, he also hosted a dinner and invited me to invite some of my former professors whose teaching also meant so much to me. Joel embraced each of us like no one else could. My forever special relationship with Joel began in his classroom nearly 30 years ago. I applied to Duke in large part so that I could study with and learn from Joel, and I got to do just that. Indeed, he was there with me and my parents when I earned my graduate and law degrees. But that first year was tough. Among other things, I was enrolled in his hard to get into and hard to survive class. He had great expectations for our capacity to read endless numbers of books and articles, to engage in serious Socratic-inspired seminars, and to make sense of it all with the precision of master writers. You know, I still have my notes from Joel's class, and all of his notes back to me about the things that I attempted to write in response to the things that I thought I was learning. So that first paper Joel wrote, a good beginning, good thinking, but work on your writing. A later paper, he wrote this, Greg, this is much better, but you still need to make your mind test your poetic literary tendencies. A subsequent paper, Greg, there's a genuineness in this paper that has not come through before. It is not only authentic writing, but is much better in style. Later, Greg, another thoughtful, well-written paper. Keep it up. You're hitting your stride. Greg, this is better. You can write exceedingly well when you decide to. Now you must learn never to accept less from yourself. That last paper in Joel's class, Greg, good thinking and good writing. You can see how for Joel, love and learning are linked. You see his love coming through on those ordinary papers, in his extraordinary comments, tough yet thoughtful, encouraging and loving, believing in my potential as a student and believing in the potential of the person I might someday become. And I know he did that for hundreds, if not thousands of other students in ordinary papers, in ordinary conversations, being his extraordinary self as a teacher and as a human being. And Joel, on behalf of this kid who studied with you all those years ago, and the one who strives still to pursue goodness as you push me to do, thank you. Truly, thank you. Love, Greg.
My name is Nan Cohen. I was a colleague of Joel's at Duke from 1993 to 2004, and we remained good friends afterward. I wanted to talk about just 4 facets of this amazing man whom we are honoring tonight. For me, he was a superb mentor, a legendary fundraiser, a pillar of Duke University, and a man with a wonderful gift for friendship. Joel was a mentor for his students, his colleagues, for men and women in public policy and academia around the world, and especially perhaps in philanthropy. He was surely a mentor for me, teaching me about the highways and byways of Duke University, about the things that made it possible to be a successful leader in this distinctive place, about the people and the history and the possible paths ahead. And in this, he channeled his own great mentor, Terry Sanford, and kept Terry's influence alive for the rest of us, even after Terry was gone. Joel was also an amazing fundraiser. When I knew him, he had just left the Atlantic Philanthropies and was no longer centrally involved in fundraising for Duke, except for the Institute for Public Policy. But the capital campaign that he led in the 1980s was the model that we as his successors strive to match. Fundraising was part of Joel's professional interest in philanthropy. For him, raising money thoughtfully and energetically and giving it away wisely and strategically were 2 sides of the same coin. He helped all of us understand the distinctive place of philanthropy in American life and in human society more generally. Joel was a pillar of Duke University, as well as a loyal alumnus of UNC, you can be both, and an important institution builder at Yale as well. He saw institutions as one of our most admirable accomplishments as a species, worth preserving and strengthening in all the ways we can. Joel's work on the Institute at Duke in the 1970s was one of his key contributions to the university. He envisioned an institute that would be a creative blend of public policy, leadership, and administrative management. A number of other universities had created schools of public policy, but Joel saw a way in which Duke could emphasize the practices and purposes which Terry Sanford had distinctively embodied. Joel believed that the Institute deserved to become a school, standing among the other professional schools at Duke, and indeed this ambition was achieved in part because of his own leadership and commitment. In addition to all these skills and accomplishments, and many others as well, Joel had an amazing gift for friendship. Everyone gathered to celebrate him can surely attest to this. We speak of his networks and his Rolodex, and these were incomparable. But I recall, for example, attending one of his birthday celebrations. I think it was the 80th at the Washington Duke Inn, where hundreds and hundreds of people were gathered to honor him. The place was totally packed. It was almost impossible to move around. For Joel, his Rolodex and his networks were really not ways of just compiling influence or getting things done. They were mostly composed of people he truly considered his friends. Each of us will have our own memories of this friendship, the dinner conversations, the talks in his office, the phone calls and the messages of support. How could he do this for so many people? Somehow he did. His holiday letter is something all of us looked forward to each year, and we'll miss it very much this year. His recounting of his travels in the autobiographical section, his musings, his poetry, maybe not his strongest suit, but something that was very dear, and his amazing generosity, giving to good causes, to honor each individual and advance the common good. We will certainly miss that letter in 2024 and in the years ahead, and we will miss Joel himself, a sparkling and memorable part of all of our lives.
Can you feel the love? You know, Judy, you said you thought he was your most important friend, and that so many of us have thought that. And the truth is, you were so important to him. You were so important to him. Because of Joel. That is a sentence I have heard most about Joel. Because of Joel. You know, when Terry first came to Duke in April in 1970, Joel was in his office just a few days after that. He had a meeting, and afterwards, Joel sent a letter in which he said that he would soon be sending some thoughts about what to do here at Duke. And then he noted that the only real expense he had was a taxi receipt for $38.09, which he enclosed. And then, of course, he sent his best regards to Margaret Rose, because he always knew, not just you, right? With your kids and your wife, your husband, your partner. But I reckon those were the best $38.09 that Duke has ever spent. But it's Joel's influence on all of us individually that I want to dwell on. I know, and I thank you all for traveling here today, and I know that you did that because I bet so many of you have your own because of Joel's story. So thank you for coming and honoring his name. And I also want to, like others have, thank Cassie and the Sanford School team and everybody for making today so special, Ben and Sophia and all the work they've put in during this time. I also want to acknowledge Pam Ladd, whom so many of you know. Where are you, Pam? There you are. You gave your whole life to that man. Thank you. Joel's friend, L. Leuvenstein, was assassinated in 1980. And Joel had the occasion to make some remarks on the person that Al was. I read those the other day, and I've been hard-pressed, oddly enough, to find any words better to describe Joel himself. So here in Joel's own words is my tribute to him. What was unique about him was his amazing capacity not only to sense those injustices about which something might conceivably be done, and to identify himself deeply with the victims of the injustice, but astonishingly, his capacity to reach out and persuade those whose energy, good fortune, talent, and wealth gave them a special capacity to do something about the problem. And as you've said, Judy, it's so hard to say no when you are at the end of those receiving calls. And why did we all follow him? Because of the sort of human being that he was. He made us better human beings. He expected more of us than we did of ourselves. He never gave up faith in our capacity to become better than we are. He was always there when we needed him. Indeed, it was because of Joel. It was because of Joel. For so many of us, it was because of Joel. Just last week, my dear friend Tony Brown told me it was because of Joel that he came to Durham. And look, Tony went on to influence so many students, hundreds of students. It was because of Joel that he came. What in your life is because of Joel? Was it a job you took? A gift you gave? A gift you received? A person you met? I bet you all have your own sentences that start with, it was because of Joel. Maya Angelou has said, your legacy is every life you touch. Joel's legacy, therefore, by definition, is immense. If he touched your life, which I know he did, his legacy continues by every life you touch. I miss him so. Thank you.
First, I want to acknowledge Bruce Cunningham's great story. As a fact checker, one, I'm glad that he told it, but also I'm glad that he included some sources, so we know, that it was all true. So thank you, Bruce. I appreciate it. I would have, if you hadn't told that story, I was going to make you come up here and tell that story because it's so important. So I'm going to talk about Joel's energy. So I get up early, and one of the first things I do is check my email. And when it used to be that when I checked my email, there was seemingly always one from Joel. And then I would look at the timestamp, and it would be, did you have this experience? It would be at like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. He never slept. And in that way, he was like our undergrads. That it's like, did he stay up that late? Or did he get up that early? I was never clear, but it would be like some article that he'd read in the New Yorker or some fundraising pitch that he'd gotten, and it had something he was concerned about, and he's like, PolitiFact needs to fact check this. So he never slept. He had so much energy. And so he was a role model to us in how to live a long and energetic life and be full of life. I remember at the dedication of Fleishman House, I ran into his doctor, who may be here, probably is here today, and I asked, what is Joel's secret to a long life? And I figured the answer would be something like salmon, or spinach balls, or brushing and flossing. But no, it was to have good genes. I couldn't really do much about that. Joel had good genes. So as we all know, Joel didn't like growing old. He loved his independence. He loved driving that old Pontiac. And even so we would go to dinner with him, my wife, Catherine, and I, we would sometimes scheme to drive, and we'd go by the house, pick him up, take him to Hawthorne and Wood, because, of course, there were only like 2 places where he would eat, here and Hawthorne and Wood. So we'd pick him up. We'd go to Hawthorne and Wood, where we'd gone many times, knew how to get there. But, of course, Joel had to tell us how to get there. Left here. Now get ready, get in the left lane, be ready, because he had so much energy, he was going to tell us from the back seat how to get there. So gradually, I think we all noticed things changed. The first came when he stopped drinking wine, and he would show up for dinner with bottles of grape juice, which was a little confounding to the maitre d's. Do you chill a bottle of grape juice? But then last summer, he took a couple of falls, and he accepted more help at home, and also when he went out to dinner. So when he came to his favorite spot for dinner, here, he began to accept a ride when he got out of the car in a wheelchair, and they would bring him to the table, his favorite table, in the wheelchair. And this was the first time that I began to talk to him about growing old. And it was the first time that he really began to complain about growing old. And he began to complain about forgetting things, and that he couldn't remember certain things and words. But I realized that he was pretty selective about it, that he could still tell long, detailed stories about those ties that he got from Ralph Lauren. He could still tell stories about Gene Patterson and stories about Terry Sanford in wonderful detail. But when the waiter would come at the end of the dinner and say, Dr. Fleishman, are you through with your dinner? And Joel would say, yes, could you get he couldn't remember wheelchair, because he didn't want to remember wheelchair. So my favorite story, which I'll end with, was during COVID. He turned 87, and Judith and I wanted to have a dinner for him. And of course, in the middle of COVID, we couldn't do it here. We couldn't do it at his home. And so Judith graciously agreed to do it in her driveway. And so I got the food, picked it up here. Somehow they thought I was him, so I pulled up, and they're like, "Here you go, Dr. Fleishman." And so the dinner, and this will surprise you, was salmon. So took it to Judith's, and we had this lovely dinner on a card table in Judith's driveway. And at the end of the dinner, Judith asked Joel what he wanted to be when he grew up. And she recorded this lovely video.
So how does it feel to be 87 years old?
I feel as young as I did when I was 21.
And how did it feel to be 21?
Young.
And what are your plans for the future?
I intend to enjoy the future as best I can.
All right, and what would you like to be when you grow up?
I would like to be an angel.
All right. You know what? I think that might just happen.
I think it will happen.
All right.
It is so wonderful to be here. One Saturday in the fall of 1970, I met Joel for breakfast at the Yale Club. He had just decided to accept Duke's offer to build a public policy institute, and he said he needed my help. He said I should quit complaining about political science and do something useful. What would that be, I asked. Come to Duke and create a program in ethics and public policy. The public policy movement needs to be more concerned about ethics, and we can lead the way. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, a chance to do something genuinely useful while I figured out what to do with my life. I didn't then guess I would be here for 35 years. So let me tell you a bit about Joel 60 or so years ago. I met him in 1962 through the National Student Association. He was a well-informed advisor for the Committee on Civil Liberties that I chaired. And that winter, a holiday card with a cordial note arrived, the first of more than 60. In my first week of graduate school at Yale in 1963, my classmate David Gergen said, "I'm supposed to know you." Joel had told him we should meet. How many of my close friendships began that way, I cannot count, but I think of Mitch Hart here as one of them. In 1964, Governor Sanford came to Yale for a week as Chubb Fellow. Joel came with him, and in long discussions each evening, often lasting till 2 or 3 a.m., I learned that Joel had been deeply involved in creating some of the great achievements of the Sanford administration. The School of the Arts, the School of Science and Math, North Carolina Fund, and so many others. I was beginning to get that my friend was extraordinary. In 1995, Joel came to New Haven to head the Yale Summer High School. Deeply interested in the great debates of that time about university reform, Joel marched on a picket line I'd helped to organize, protesting the loss of Yale's best teacher of philosophy. A year later, I crashed. Too little sleep, full-time study, and more than full-time work on civil rights and against the war in Vietnam. After a few days of convalescence,
Al Lowenstein found a job for me with Norman Thomas for 6 weeks, traveling around the country, speaking against the war. And then I went to Joel, my most reliable friend, for advice. He suggested that I teach for a year, and within a couple of days, he had found a spot for me at Stillman College. By mid-1967, I was back in New Haven. The Dump Johnson movement, and then in 1968, Gene McCarthy, Bobby Kennedy, and Hubert Humphrey's sadly losing campaign. The one bright spot was that our friend Al Lowenstein won a seat in Congress after campaigning against the war. We drove down to Long Island to celebrate the occasion. You can see why I thought I knew Joel well. And in some days I did. But there was far more to him than I knew. Not only did he have an astonishing number of good friends, he was prodigiously learned about a wide range of subjects and phenomenally good at building institutions. At Duke, ethics was high on Joel's agenda. Beyond our curriculum, there were seminars at Harvard and the Hastings Center. While I designed courses and wrote the grant proposals, Joel did the editing, the planning, the negotiating, and in time together, we wrote a book, Ethics and the Education of Policymakers. We believed that ethics should be about the problems of people who were the objects of policy, not just the policymakers. And so we added history and literature and documentary studies to our efforts. One day I called Joel to report that Alex Harris was back in town. And two major fellowships had identified him as one of America's finest photographers. And he was willing to teach as a part-time instructor. To my amazement, Joel said we couldn't do that he'd just completed negotiations with the deans, and having gotten what was needed for the Institute for the coming year, he'd promised not to ask for anything more. For the first time, and the first time I ever said, "Joel, that's not acceptable." A long silence followed, and I feared I'd gone too far. But then he said, "Well, Bruce, would you like to raise some real money?" Which led at first to a 3-year grant of $300,000, and eventually, with Alex's brilliant efforts, to the Center for Documentary Studies. Joel was meanwhile building an organization that had several other equally complex dimensions. He was also, I learned, quietly campaigning to improve the way major foundations evaluated the success of their grants. And he found time, as you know, to be an advisor and a mentor to a number of students and to many other friends. How he did this, I do not know. I know he worked hard, that he was brilliant and astonishingly well organized, but I still don't know how he managed. He seemed indispensable. But of course he wasn't that. He built for the future well enough so that the Sanford School and the university and so many other institutions could eventually flourish without him. This Sunday, I'll be 83. For the first time in decades, I won't have a phone call from Joel singing happy birthday. But at dinner, 3 of our former students and their spouses will join Jack and me in hoisting some glasses of fine wine, remembering with joy and gratitude his astonishing presence in our lives.
I now understand why I married a documentary filmmaker after going to Duke and studying with both Bruce and Joel. I'm Daniel Voll. I met Joel in 1979. I was a freshman at Duke, a scholarship kid from a Rust Belt town in the Midwest. When I got to Duke, I needed a work-study job. I saw an ad, research assistant needed, public policy department. So I opened the door at Old Chem to Joel's outer office and heard typewriters clacking away inside, and Bunny Wheeler, Pam's aunt, was Joel's assistant then. She waved me in, pointing to Joel's door, and he was seated in a chair facing away, talking into a dictating machine with a foot pedal, which allowed him to have his hands free for the steaming pot of tea that he was pouring with the steam billowing around him. As Joe swiveled around, and I saw his kind, sparkling eyes and those astonishing eyebrows. He looked wise and curious, and we began talking, a conversation that lasted a lifetime. As Joel's research assistant for 20-plus hours a week, over the next 4 years, I helped Joel research books, articles, drafted speeches, I interviewed subjects, I hunted down arcane references. My job was to challenge his arguments and back up my own with evidence. It was terrifying and exhilarating. For those of you who played squash with Joel, it was like that. It was close quarter combat. I was afraid of no one after Joel. He taught me to be a reporter, a hunting dog. The world Joel included me in was my essential education at Duke. He took me to Fayetteville, where as a Protestant kid, I entered a synagogue for the first time. Listening to him as a cantor was magical. In that first Thanksgiving break, most Duke students were flying home, and Joel somehow intuited that I didn't have the money to buy that plane ticket and had nowhere to go. And so he invited me to spend Thanksgiving up in the North Carolina mountains at the farm of the legendary Congressman Jamie Clark and his family. Joel was driving his convertible with Mozart blasting, and I was so grateful to be along for the ride. And I wasn't the first to go with Joel up to the Clarks, and I wasn't the last. Alex Harris remembers how Joel, that drive and as they started ascending the mountain, how Joel looked over with absolute delight and said, "We're going up, Alex, we're going up." My job had given me a ringside seat to the marvel and enthusiasm that was Joel Fleishman. Joel invited me once and my college girlfriend to his summer cottage at Nag's Head, where you walked in and Grace was making spinach balls and fried chicken, and where was Joel? In the happiest place, sitting at his desk, beginning to write his holiday cards in August, folks. Once I told Joel how much I loved the classic film The Thin Man, which I'd just seen. Not long after, Joel invited me to dinner in New York and said there was someone special he wanted me to meet. And our dinner companion that night was none other than Myrna Loy. Joel was on a mission to bring people together, and when I mentioned once that I wanted to go to South Africa to cover the anti-apartheid resistance back in 1983, he reached out to Tina Brown at Vanity Fair, and gave me my first magazine assignment. At my graduation, my folks drove across the country from Rockford, Illinois, their only trip to Duke. I was the commencement speaker, but what touched me the most was that Joel threw a party for my parents. I took a photo, which is on my desk in LA, and in that photo, my folks are sitting in a pair of chairs, and Joel is seated cross-legged on the floor between them, beaming with delight. Our daughter, Undine, is a Duke senior now. Joel watched over her also. Together, Undine and I attended Joel's last class. But it was Joel's gesture of inviting me, a Thanksgiving orphan, to that dinner my freshman year. That's my touchstone as I celebrate Joel. I treasure the image of him driving up in the mountains, exclaiming, "We're going up. We're going up." Joel lifted us all up. As Flannery O'Connor said, everything that rises must converge. We're still all converging.
It's an honor to deliver the remarks of Isaac Herzog, the President of Israel. My relationship with President Herzog, of course, is yet another of these hundreds of Joel connection stories, filled with love and great intentions. Joel knew Chaim Herzog, the sixth President of Israel, and his wife Ara, and of course Joel met their son Isaac and his wife Michal. Isaac, who is affectionately known to all as Bougie, was a young lawyer who eventually was elected as the 11th President of Israel. It's the first time a father and son each served as President of Israel. My connection to Bougie came about in 1993 when Governor Jim Hunt encouraged Jane Patterson and me to build a partnership with Israel on behalf of North Carolina. The partnership was unique because state efforts usually are about economic development. Instead, we targeted knowledge as the currency and connecting peers in their professional pursuits, which extended beyond business to new technologies, the arts, social sciences, education, etc. And of course, when people get to know each other socially and organically, they might want to do business together too. Jane and I had an obvious starting point. I mean, isn't that a Joel-level idea, right? Where would your first stop be when your state's building a relationship with Israel predicated on making connections between people pursuing their professional passions and who would not know each other otherwise in their partnership being in the Jewish state, which Joel loved? Joel was instantly excited and animated and immediately gave the effort tangible encouragement with money, and then connected us with Bougie, who became another connection, first and foremost to me, a lifelong friend, and who was the door-opening, invaluable guide for the partnership. So here are Bougie's reflections on our shared mission and on behalf of the State of Israel. Eulogy for Joel Fleishman of blessed memory by President Isaac Herzog. Joel was a man who gave his time, money, and energy with generosity and grace. He gave without cost, imported knowledge without reserve, shared advice without condition. Joel was a proud Jew and a spiritual giant of our people. He left an imprint on public management and philanthropic policy, designing the theoretical framework for a previously unresearched field. He taught, he authored, he built, and mentored. Above all, Joel was a man who connected. He connected with academicians, with policymakers and artists, with generations of students, with politicians and journalists, with entrepreneurs and tycoons. He did not seek them out. Somehow they found their way to him. Joel's circle of colleagues and acquaintances were boundless. He could converse with anyone he met, yet he ensured that his close, lifelong friends knew how profoundly important they were to him and how much they enriched his life. My late parents, Chaim and Ara Herzog, cherished their friendship with him. Joel's tradition of contributing to humanitarian causes at the beginning of a new year in honor of his friends, exemplified the beauty and the kindness he possessed. Michal and I loved Joel dearly. He passed away just before the new Jewish year began, and we look forward to continuing his tradition of giving to honor his memory. Joel led a long life, rich with meaning and purpose. The people of Israel mourn the loss of his voice, of this voice of reason and compassion, and will miss him dearly. Isaac Herzog, President of the State of Israel.
Good evening. Now, Cassie, where are you? I thought you liked me. How could you put me at the end of this incredible community of people? I'll do my best. I'm speaking on behalf of Ralph Lauren, a dear friend of Joel Fleishman. But before I do that, I just want to express my own pleasure and joy in knowing Joel as a mentor and a dear friend. I've only known Joel for 20 years, which pales in comparison to many of you. But from the first day I met him, I knew he saw me. And if there's one thing that I hope lives on, is how much Joel taught us the power of one. The power that one person can change another person's life by simply seeing them for who they are. As a daughter of immigrants from Brooklyn, New York, it would never have occurred to me that a man like Joel Fleishman would take me under his wing and make me the person that I am today. I am the Chief People Officer and the head of the Ralph Lauren Foundation, not short in part because of Joel's pushing, endearing love, and confidence in me at times when I didn't even know the potential I had. So I will for sure continue in his spirit. Ralph and the board are all in board meetings today and tomorrow, and they would have been here themselves if they could be. So Ralph wanted us to send Joel this message. It'll sound very familiar to many of you. Remembering Joel by Ralph Lauren. I didn't get a call from my old friend Joel Fleishman on my birthday this year. Every year for decades, he would call and sing happy birthday to me. The whole song in his wonderful Southern accent. And though I knew he wouldn't call this year, as he had just passed away 2 weeks before, I still somehow expected he'd find a way to continue that special tradition. That's what Joel did for his friends. He kept us close. He remembered the things that mattered, like our birthdays, and the moments that were special in such personal ways. Friends meant everything to him. They were his family, and he was ours. I first met Joel at Duke at a speaking engagement. A friend whose daughter went there told me I had to meet this special man, Joel Fleishman, an inspiring scholar and a special human being. And though it was a short meeting, we connected meaningfully. When my son David and I visited Duke years later for a college interview, I introduced him to Joel and they connected. And they had an energy and vitality that was contagious. I told David, Joel Fleishman is the reason you should come to Duke. And he did. And Joel not only became his mentor and special friend, but he became a friend of our family. And when David and Lauren were married, Joel, a deeply spiritual man, officiated as a cantor at their wedding. When he founded Duke's Sanford School of Social Policy in the early 70s, melding the law and social policy together, Joel created a whole new way of thinking about philanthropy, at every level. He was a scholar, but very much a man of the world who believed in ethics and that it was not just a college course, but a way to live. He took many young people under his wing, including my son, and inspired them to fulfill themselves in a way beyond the trappings of success, but in ways that made them fully human. I invited Joel to become one of the first board members building on the foundational values of our company. And for 22 years, he did just that, sharing his experience, his unique personality, intelligence, and special belief in my vision, although never sharing his ties. Our world of 26,000 employees and the men, women, and children, our customers who we have shared the world with for almost 60 years, benefited from his presence. Joel had a huge appetite for living. He loved to entertain, the taste of fine vintage wine, to share a good meal, perhaps sometimes at the Polo Bar, to listen to classical music, but most of all, to bring people together. People in his wide world of different friends from different places. In the end, one thing we will all know about Joel is he never forgot about love. He lived it. He defined it. He shared it with all of us. Thank you, Joel. Love, Ralph.
Hi, I'm Adam Abram, and this is my son, Benjamin Abram. Joel Fleishman was very important to our family, as he has been to many of your families and to many of you individually. Joel made family of friends. And all of us celebrating Joel today owe Joel's family a debt of gratitude for sharing him with us. And I want to point out, Stephanie Wolf is there, Stephanie, Joel's niece who's in the audience today. And I just wanted to thank Stephanie, you and your family, for sharing him with all of us. Joel was objectively a great leader, but equally importantly, he actively worked to be a profoundly good person. And in a moment, we are going to carve out a minute when each of us can summon our personal memories of connections with and to Joel in a moment of silence. But first, in keeping with Joel's deep connection to his faith and to our Jewish roots, I'm going to ask his cousin, Rabbi Jonathan Rosenblatt, to lead us in a very quick psalm and Kaddish. Rabbi?
It is so appropriate. We began this beautiful tribute with the classical music, which was so important to Joel's spirit, and to end with another channel of music, music of the Eastern European Jewry, the soil in which he grew. This is the 23rd Psalm, as chanted in that tradition. When I conclude, if you would like to join me in the recitation of the Kaddish prayer. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi, lo echsor, vinos deshe yalbitzeni, al mei menuchos yenahaleini, נפשי ישובב, ינחני במגלי צדק, למען שמו. גם כי ילך בגיא צלמו, וסלו ירערו, כי עתו עמדי שבתך ומשענתך, המו ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צוררוי, דשנתו בשמן ראשי, כוסי לבויו. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. יסגדל ויסקדש שמי רבו. ביוממו יברך ירוסי וימליך מלכוסי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלו בזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבו מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עולמיו. יספורך וישתבח ויספואר וישרומם ויסנשא, ויסדר ויסעלה ויסהלל, שמי דקודשו בריחו. לאלו מכל ברכסו ושירסו, תושבחסו ונחמסו, דאמירון בעולמו ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום רבו מן שמאיו, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
Thank you, Rabbi. And now, a moment of silence in which each of us can simultaneously summon Joel in our own way. Thank you. And then I want to ask Benjamin, who's going to be introducing the next part of this meeting, to speak.
I love you, Pops. We'll end here with some logistics and 3 cheers. Logistics first. If you stood for Mourners Kaddish, would you mind also joining for Mincha Minyan? We've got a couple mourners in the building, so if you could join for 10 minutes here, it would be really helpful if you were among the mourners who stood. That would be great. Second piece of logistics. After this, we're going to have 3 things going on simultaneously. We're going to have cocktail hour outside, and come get a drink. Come see what's at the rotunda of Joel, and you know see and take a piece of Joel's life from his house and from his life. And we'll have in a few minutes, maybe in 20 minutes, we'll do some sharing. If you would rather be one, then cocktails are great. But if you'd rather stay in kind of more like a friends meeting kind of moment, come back in here. We'll start with Pam Ladd in 20 minutes to do some sort of like open mic sort of thing. So if you want to just kind of be quiet and contemplative and listening and maybe having the mic and share, come back in 20 minutes from your cocktails or stay out there. And then of course the Fairview dining room is open. So whenever you feel like grabbing a table full of people, you know, go over there. This is the evening concludes however you want it to conclude. And before we go from here, I wanted to say 3 quick cheers. And in Hebrew, our word for cheers is l'chaim, so you'll join me in a moment. First cheers is to all of Joel's friends who, representing all of Joel's friends, were up on the stage and gave these really sweet remembrances. L'chaim.
L'chaim.
The second cheers is to the people who have supported Joel at Duke and at home. Obviously, we're thinking of you, Cassie, and your amazing planning here through generations, Lador Vador, Pam, and Nicholas, and all of the crew that you've had. And also, of course, the Washington Duke Inn and staff that has been amazing to take care of Joel for so much time, and even the photographers and Navy crew. So, l'chaim. And then the last l'chaim I want to give is, Judy, you were sweet to say, you know, to add my wife and I to your note, you know, here we are sort of running communication, running comms for Friends of Joel for the last couple of months, and we've enjoyed that role. But like all of us, we have great strength behind us, and so I wanted to give a very serious and meaningful l'chaim to the man who Joel picked to make sure that this moment in Joel's life went smoothly. And you have been doing a ton of work behind the scenes to gather very small groups of people, Joel's closest lawyers and accountants and housekeeping, and also his closest doctors in these moments. Dad, we really owe you great thanks for the extraordinary thing that you've done here here at Joel and the Lamb. So we say l'chaim. Thank you. I love you. Minion, have fun.